Joe Hockey, thank you for joining us. Is it slightly unsettling to be living in the United States at this time?
Yes, it is. Because at the end of the day, home is Australia, and you feel more comfortable and you feel as though you have better access to health facilities and better security in Australia than you might have here. And so it's a bit unsettling.
How are you and your family coping?
Well, the first week, the kids thought it was fantastic to be at home and off school. That's worn off, and I think we're starting to get a bit on each other's nerves. But, it's actually a really good time to reflect on the things that really matter in life. And, what I've thought a lot about is that maybe this is Mother Nature's way of saying to all of us, how about humanity, you give me a bit of a break, take a bit of a rest, stop torturing the earth and start to think about how you treat each other and how you treat the environment.
Given America now has the highest number of infected patients in the world, are you shocked by what you're seeing?
Well, no, I'm not shocked because the United States has a really fractured health system, and Americans have a very strong view about freedom and liberty, and they're very concerned about any increase in government influence. So you had the absurd situation, Liz, where the governor of New York, who is now facing the greatest crisis on earth, was warning the president that if the president shut the boundaries of New York State, the governor might take him to court to reverse it. Now, you wouldn't get that in Australia, but the defence of liberty and freedom here is very important.
You know Donald Trump and you know the people around him quite well. How do you assess his leadership at this time?
Well, unquestionably, the president was slow out of the gates, and that's because closing down a society is an enormous issue for a country of 340 million people. But closing down vast chunks of the United States is unprecedented. And Donald Trump is not someone that readily relies on expert advice. Throughout his life, he's operated on gut instinct, and that's been very successful for him, and he's done well at it. But on this occasion, you have to take the expert opinion. Every government has looked at the option of having a limited shutdown in order to preserve jobs, because, quite frankly, when you shut down an economy, the greatest risk in places like the United States and China, more so than Australia or the UK, the threat is civil unrest. And there's no safety net here that Australians might be familiar with. If people lose their jobs, and 75% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, if they lose their jobs, then they start to starve. So closing down the economy is perhaps a much greater, much more significant decision here in the United States than it would be in Australia.
So you are suggesting to me that whilst the economy is important and obviously health is vital, something unique might happen in America, and that is civil unrest.
Well, there's always the threat of civil unrest, and I think the increase in gun sales and the increased military presence and National Guard presence on the streets indicates that leaders share that view. Now, again, in part that's because America just does not have the social security safety net that Australia, the UK and certainly European countries have.
It is predicted at its worst, something like 2 million people could die. At its best, maybe 200,000. Do you think America is prepared for that?
Well, Americans are starting to prepare for the worst. Obviously, the very slow testing here meant that the numbers of total people infected are pretty meaningless. I've spoken to a lot of people around the US who said they just can't get tested, and yet they have the symptoms. So I expect that the numbers that are infected far exceed any of the official numbers, and therefore there's a risk that the death toll will exceed any of the official projections.
Do you think this will be a determining moment for Donald Trump's leadership?
Yes, of course it will, and it's certainly drowned out all the noise about the US presidential election. It's interesting that politicians on both sides of the political fence have made mistakes here in the United States as the coronavirus has got worse. The American people rally behind their president in moments of adversity for the nation. The fundamental question is, can Donald Trump get the nation back open safely before the November election? If he can't, then it's going to put a lot of pressure on his re-election chances. But the one thing about Donald Trump you can be sure of is that he has no regard for tradition and he has no regard for precedent. He will do what he thinks needs to be done to get America back on track. What it means is that the world that we're going to inherit in from the end of this year on is going to be very different to what we've lived in. I think you're going to see the world divide into 2 or 3 camps. You're going to see America look inward about all of its supply lines, massively reduce its reliance on China, India, and the rest of the world for a lot of its supply lines. What we want in Australia is to be there as a close ally and make sure that we're part of the American narrative and they don't leave us behind as they take on a very new direction.
Why am I documenting this? Well, because I want my kids to remember how significant this event has been, not just for the United States and Australia, but for the whole world. There's just no one around.
You took some video in the streets and you said that you were wanting to record this so as your children would understand and remember this time. This is something we won't see again in a long time.
Well, I hope we don't see it again. I think, the virus is going to be around for a while and it might mutate into something worse. But I really, every generation has to go through some moment of hardship and this is our time and it's going to define who we are and it's going to define the future of our children. And I don't want my children to lose this moment because hopefully they can learn the lessons that we didn't listen to over the last few years.
Joe, how do you see this ending? How do you think this is going to be for all of us when it's all said and done?
Well, adversity makes us stronger. It's going to cause us all to look deeply into ourselves and ask ourselves what's important in life and how we engage with each other, how we treat family and friends is going to really matter. The thing I'm celebrating is the end of populism. I think we're going to see the end of popular rule because the good leaders are the ones that have had to make really unpopular and hard decisions, and they're going to be proven right in doing so. And so it's hopefully the end of opinion polls, the end of populism. We get back to the days when good government does what's in the best interest of the people rather than doing whatever, popular opinion might suggest.
Hello, I'm Sarah Arbo. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.